Hello and a warm welcome to our viewers in Nigeria and all around the world. Many thanks for joining us on this edition of the program People, Politics and Power. I am Imonia Marire. October 1 every year, Nigeria celebrates its independence from Britain, its former colonial master. This year is the 62nd anniversary. Unexpectedly, the government rolled out the drums in the form of military parades to mark the event. Not the usual ostentatious celebrations of the past, we must say. Now, in spite of the fact that it is the last such celebration by this administration, which is on the final lap of its tenure. Today is being marked as a public holiday in Nigeria to commemorate the actual date which fell on a Saturday. It had been 62 years of a topsy-turvy ride, which many think could have been much smoother than it is today if only we have been more committed and dedicated to the dreams and aspirations of our founding fathers, and only if we had been more selflessly focused on national development instead of selfish primordial desires. Yet, some others think the country has made appreciable progress in the face of its many challenges, which included a 30-month-long civil war and several decades of military rule that distorted what could otherwise have been an orderly trajectory of social, political, and economic progress. It is debatable if Nigeria would have been much better off if the leadership at every stage had been different and had taken another path to national development. What is, however, not in doubt is that these past 62 years have been brought with them what the legendary musician Fela Anikulapo Kuti describes as suffering and smiling. For a country as richly endowed in human and natural resources, why have we failed to maximize the huge opportunities to build a united, formidable nation where no man is oppressed and where no child goes to bed hungry? How and why did we manage to get to the bottom rung of the ladder as the poverty capital of the world, with all the abundant resources at our disposal? What have been the pains, the possibilities that we ignored or failed to identify and utilize, and what are the potentials that lie ahead of us as a people? Well, on the program today, we shall do a bit of the unusual. We shall allow our guests, who are right here in the studio with us, to have a robust conversation around the issues and steer it in the direction they think would bring Nigeria back from the brink. That means that there will be very little interference from me as moderator of the program today. I will just allow our analysts to do all the talking, converse amongst themselves, and suggest the pathway forward for Nigeria. You will get to meet our guest analysts right after now. Stay with us. All right, let's get to meet our guest analysts, three of them who are right here in the studio. First, from my immediate left is Professor Gabriel Keto Moti. He's the Dean, Postgraduate School at the University of Abuja. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us.
Thank you, and happy independence to Nigerians.
Also joining us is Nkechi Ilochi Kani. Nkechi is the head of programs at Action Aid Nigeria. Thank you so much, Nkechi, for finding time to join us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we are also joined by Tunde Aremu, a civil society activist, policy research and influencing manager at Plan International in Nigeria. Thank you so much, Tunde, for finding time to join us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So maybe I should set the tone for this discussion. Prof, it is said that man is the epicenter of development, and that it is that in every nation, every nation's progress is a reflection of its people, who determine its development and growth through their actions or inactions. What has been the case with Nigeria in the last 62 years?
Well, you started with human development. And so let me bring to mind something I was thinking about, and I think it would be useful just to go through and then set the pace for my colleagues to emphasize more on that. And I think one of the issues or theories we can use to help us run through what has happened to us in the 62 years of our life as a nation, our leaders have rather been more of transactional leaders than transformational, to be able to care and cater for our people. You talked about selfishness, and that is what happened when you cannot focus on general activity. And when that happens, it leads us to stagnation. And stagnation has to do with a prolonged period of little or no growth in the economy. Any economy that does not grow more than 2% is considered to be stagnant. It has to be 5 and above. Today, in 2020, it was minus 1.8%. We are just struggling with 2.1, which is still within the area of stagnation. And that is why today you find out that although we are the 27th economy of the world, we are the 24th in terms of purchasing power. But then we have 32% unemployment and 22.4% inflation. So where does the purchasing power come? In terms of production industry, we are just 23.63%. So we are not producing enough. So even if you want to buy within, it's not enough. The money inflation has reduced the power of our own currency, and that is why people are crying. In terms of human development index that you mentioned, we are 0.539, which places Nigeria 161 out of 192 countries in the world. Now, we have done a lot of efforts, but these efforts, from what you can see, are not good enough. And today, lastly, where are we? The issue of integrity and despair, the last stage, which I think Nigeria is in now. And what is integrity? The ability for a country or an individual to look back and say, look, we have accomplished. We have made certain fulfillment. Our president made a broadcast to us on the 1st and talked about accomplishment, talked about fulfillment. But many Nigerians may not necessarily agree with him. So when you don't see acceptance, wholeness, success, and wisdom, when you are below your expectations and potentials, you are not met integrity. And when you don't meet integrity, what happens? Despair comes in. Despair is looking back and feeling that the potentials you mentioned about have not been fulfilled. There is regret, there is shame, there is disappointment, bitterness. We are ruminating over mistakes, wasted life and opportunity, unproductiveness, hopelessness and despair, and that is what is leading people outside. That is what is leading people not satisfied with the way we are as a country. And that is why I think, for me, one of the solutions is if we balance between integrity and despair, and that has to do with integrity of leadership. If you don't balance that, that despair will not end. And I'm happy, way forward, before they come in, I'm happy. The young people have now decided not to leave the political space, participation, in the hands of the lowly people, but to bring it up to the middle income that I've talked about and participate. And this participation, whether we like it or not, is going to change the manner and way we are going to produce the next leadership in Nigeria.
That's where our potentials lie.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open now. I like I said, I'm going to contribute very little. I need you people to weigh in on this.
Okay, so maybe I could just jump in on this.
That's right.
And to say that, starting from where he stopped, to say that Nigeria, this is a time where we have reflected. There has been a lot of reflection happening about Nigeria. Where did we get it wrong? Where did we start? And where are we now? And I was whispering to Tunde here and saying that perhaps this conversation shouldn't be about being worried or being what was the language they use about
it shouldn't be about our
complaining, about
yes.
agonizing. Perhaps we shouldn't agonize at this time, but we should reflect on where do we want to go from here. But he said something that also let me reflect again, to say that we must know where we are coming from. It's not about agonizing, but also reflecting from where we are coming from.
Like you say, where the rain started beating
Exactly,
us.
and you don't know where you're going to go, where you're heading to. And so that takes me to the point that I want to emphasize, especially if a country decides to leave behind, right, a certain population of its, a certain population, women, the young people, and the children behind, and you think that they do not matter. We've cried ourselves cross for so long. For many years we've been agitating, women's group have been agitating and saying that no country can develop if you do not carry along the population, the women's population along in terms of leadership, in terms of national development, and recognizing their contribution at the family and at the societal level. And so we've left these people behind, and we've been playing tokenism to this set of people. Now, if you leave 50% of your good hands behind or by the sideline, how then do you think you're going to grow? Or how then do you think you're going to improve? So we have left the women behind. And now this concept, Prof said something about young people looking at the identity crisis and young persons beginning to leave the country. There is something that is worrisome around people leaving the country. You know, the concept of Japa or Japaism, that people are leaving the country, is not a good concept that we should laugh at. It's a concept that tells of the failure of a nation. It's a concept that shows that people do not believe anymore in their own nation or in their own state, right? And so it should be something that gets us to be worried. And so for me, it's for us to begin to say, as Nigerians, how do we go back to the drawing board? How do we ensure that the population of women, young persons that are going to make this nation great and take us to where we should be are being left behind and are leaving the country? Now imagine in the next 5, 6, 10 years, you have a population of young persons, almost 30–40% of them leaving Nigeria. This is capital intellectual flight. People who could have contributed knowledge intellectually to the development or to the national development are leaving the country. And they are going to develop other countries. And they get there. The point is that they don't come back because the nation is not conducive enough for them to come back. And so they are not going to come back. And you've lost this generation, you've lost this population to other countries. So this is a time where the leaders should desist from the selfishness to a point where we are in the country where we can all come together and say enough is enough. We need to get our young people on the table. We need to get our women on the table of decision making and contributing their quota to the national development.
I mean, it's where I come from. You know, there's a saying. Maybe I say in the language first that Orobruku Tonteri, that when you have some very sad situation on your hand, at times you embrace it with some form of laughter. I was listening to Prof, and then I was listening to an Heged analysis of the Nigeria situation. And what I was wondering about is how do we bring this closer to people, to the average listener there, so that they understand what we are saying. And we also start looking at how do we understand the crisis we are in. How do we also start projecting forward? And when we were speaking just before you came to us, one of the things that also struck me when she said, look, the type of agonies that we keep having repeatedly. And I said, well, it's not just about agonies. We also have to say, okay, we've had some wins. But what happened along the line? How did we lose it? I think we have to first of all get there. And I will still come back to what Prof said about identity, because it's also wrapped around, a lot of things are wrapped around the issue of identity. But interestingly, I also try to not to sound theoretical about identity issue. But a lot of things are subsumed under it. But let me start from where we were. As at 1960, when we had independence, we had only 5 universities in the whole of the country. As at today, I've lost count of the universities we have in terms of private and public-owned universities.
Almost 200.
I mean, almost 200.
Yeah.
That's a leap forward, actually, if you also take, if you do comparative analysis of growth of institutions of learning in different countries in Africa, and even across other spheres, either the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. So in that area, we could say, okay, we've taken some, in terms of numerical strength of the universities we have now. I'm not even counting I'm not counting the polytechnics, I'm not counting the number of colleges of education we have. I'm not counting the number of professors we have now. I mean, we've made some substantial progress. But then you also ask yourself, I left the university in the 80s. And the interesting thing, I was reflecting on this some few days ago. And one thing that struck me is that as at the time I was getting to the university in 1984, some of the people I met in the universities who were my lecturers were actually people who had gone out of this country who returned voluntarily because they felt there was a place to return to. And then I also went to university with students from different parts of the world. They were coming to Nigeria to study. We had that kind of environment where everybody wanted to come to. Today, we now have people who are trained here, who are running away. So you don't even talk about people who have gone, coming back. I mean, these are also some. So you look at in terms of numerical strength of the universities we've had as at 1962, about 5 of them, to what we now have, as at now, over 200 universities that we have now. And you ask yourself, what has gone wrong? Where did we get it wrong? And you also look at the quality of scholarship. Professor is in the university system, and he understands what I'm saying. I'm sorry, it may sound very nasty thing to say, but I've seen PhD theses that when I look at them, I laugh, I read it, and I ask myself, where did we get it wrong? Then, let me also let's talk about economy, that's about education, let's talk about healthcare system, let's talk about human development index, which we have also expanded on very well. And one thing that also struck me, that when you talk about our healthcare system, is that there were basic things that were taken care of that you don't have to get out of this country to take care of. Now, basic things. I was discussing with a friend just before I came into the studio. And the friend was talking about a particular health challenge that I'm aware of. That I have a friend who had similar case and was treated at University of Ibadan in the 80s. And now we have to get out of the country to go and treat the same ailment. And then you also ask yourself, how did we get it wrong? And then when you talk about our economy, we often talk about a nation flowing with milk and honey. And let me go back and borrow from Fela, just as you did when you were doing the introduction. Now Nigeria is a country of pain. And then you also ask yourself, how did we get here? Sir, in 1962, we had a national development plan in 1962. And we've had a series of other national development plans called different types of names over time. So what happened to them? In terms of, is it the conceptualization that had issues? Is it the framing of them that had issues? Is it the implementation that we have problem with? And those are some of the questions I keep asking myself. And is a huge amount of issues that you have to deal with when you deal with Nigeria problem. But let me now zero it down to the issue of identity that Prof started with. When you talk about education, you talk about healthcare, you talk about economy, you can also separate it from identity. And what do I mean about identity here? What are the principles and philosophies that actually drive everything that you do? I think where we started getting it wrong is that we adopted a policy, we adopted a principle, we adopted philosophies that unfortunately are not designed to actually help developing nations. An emergent democracy as ours as a 1960. And we keep saying it, that look, go around the world today, for every countries that have grown and have been in crisis, you also find out that the driving philosophy, when it is based on market economy, you begin to have crisis. And you can't divorce the issue of who owns what, who controls what, from the issue of identity. Unfortunately, you also find out that the issue of manipulation also comes in when you also start talking about who controls what. And that is also why I also say that our definition of identity issue has always been flawed. There is no Hausa, there is no Igbo, there is no Yoruba, there is no Buari, there is no Ijaw anywhere that can be separated or that can be distinguished when it comes to poverty. Poverty is poverty everywhere. The poor man, the poor woman, the poor girl there has no other identity than poverty. So the issue of chauvinist nationalism that you also find that start affecting us are also issues that are also built around the issue of economy. It's also about the issue of manipulation that comes with the type of economy that we run, that comes with the type of philosophy that we run, that comes with the type of ideology that drives our economy. And where am I going? As I said earlier on, I don't want to become abstract. I don't want to go in line of abstracts now. What I'm saying is this. For as long as we run an absolute capitalist system, where it is about the accumulation of property and wealth by individuals, by just a section of the populace, we keep having this crisis that we have. It's going to define the type of education system we are going to have. It's going to define the type or the way we manage our economy. It's going to define the way we manage our healthcare system. It's going to define the way our industries are managed and developed. Don't also let us forget the fact that, look, I don't want to mention names, but you find that among certain categories of people in this country, you find them following themselves, supporting themselves at their burial ceremonies, at their mother's burial ceremonies. You find them at their children's wedding ceremonies. I come from a state where my former governor's son got married to the daughter of another governor. But what you see, the issue of identity there is not about ethnicity. It's not about which part of the country they belong to. It's about which class they belong to. The type of education the child of that woman or that man in Asokoro, where we are sitting now, is going to access is different from the type of education the child of that woman or that man in Yanya or Maraba will access. And that type of education they are going to have is also not going to be determined by where they come from in the country, but how much resources they have access to. So when you talk about identity, these are also some of the issues that we need to. And deliberately, the leadership of the country has deliberately twisted it in a way that it favors them. That it favors the ruling class, that the real tribes that we have in the country, the tribe of the poor and the tribe of the rich, are actually unable to define those tribes properly. And the poor forever are told that, look, the reason why you have crisis is because an Hausa man has been in control for 8 years.
So negative deployment of our diversity.
The diversity.
Prof?
Yeah. I think that's wonderful analysis and breaking down of the tone you set and we are climbing on or standing on. Yes, in my analysis you can also find that, yeah, we have made certain strides in spite of, just like you highlighted. We came out of the crisis and confusion of a civil war. We were able to, how do we govern ourselves? Parliamentary democracy, presidential democracy, military democracy, whichever you want to call it, or authoritarian rule. There was crisis in that area. So crisis of governance, system of governance, we also had it. Eventually, 1999. And to be able to sustain that to this level, I think is some form of where we can celebrate that we are moving a little bit. And the electoral system too. When we started, it was terrible. You will remember you can go to your village, go to your polling booth, carry the military with you, every talk that you can afford to, and go and pack all the ballot papers and ballot boxes, find a room somewhere to print, bring it triumphantly, hand it to INEC, and they announce you winner. Gradually, we are going away from that. I think that those are certain elements of progress. But just like they said, the elites have found it difficult to open the space for participation of the vulnerable people, which include the women and youth she talks about, and much more beyond that, those with disability and issues like that. We don't think they exist. We don't think the poor person really matters. He talked about education. How many people will go to private university and pay a minimum of 2 million to train their child? That is within Nigeria. Some can afford, that is why they are taking them there. Many who can't afford and few who can afford, including our first family, train their children abroad. And like he said, when they come, the level of competition and entry into the economy and acquisition and capture of resources is different from that boy that went, or that girl that went to a public university. Because those facilities, those environments to exercise your brain and be able to connect and learn certain new things are not being provided. So what we have had, just like he has said, the rich and the poor, that is the fight that is on. So all these other elements of diversity he talks about. So eventually, we were able to take the military out. The elites that were on the sideline or in the trench, waiting and lamenting, have taken over. And that they have taken over is like, I finish my turn, it's your turn the next time. So the person comes in. And what happened is completely a state capture that is going on within this nation. Certain people have captured the state of Nigeria, the resources of Nigeria, and they share it among themselves. And they are not more than 1% of this nation. And we're 200 million or thereabout. And that is why I say one of the things going forward is the realization of the middle class. Even if you don't agree we have a middle class, we do have people that have maybe secondary education, polytechnic, university education, who have been marginalized and stagnated. I talk about stagnation. There are people who have finished their thesis, they have not been graduated. They can't go to NYC, they don't have the certificate of a university or so, they don't have an NYC discharge, so they can't apply for a job. They are stagnated. You have people who want to go in, there are 2 sets or 3 sets that JAM has cleared. They can't get into a university, because our focus is not on education, but the capture of the resources of the country. So give it to education, open the space, let the young people participate. It's not the concern of us now. But that is where we should be going, and those are the things you're talking about. The young ladies, the young people to be able to do this. And that's why I say I'm happy. The young people are now realizing that as long as you allow this elite determined, say, tribe, you are being marginalized by this tribe, come and help us vote them out so that I come in. this stagnation, this identity crisis will continue. And now that they are coming in and saying we will take over, and what we're seeing on the streets, mobilizing themselves, don't mind who they are mobilizing for, whether it is Asiwaju or Atiku or Peter Obi, that mobilization is something that is going to change the issue of state capture and the realization of leadership in Nigeria. Because these people are 60% of this country, and they own less than 5% of the resources of this country. So if you don't have a turnaround in that, things are going to be difficult. You must focus on the people. And then you talked about selflessness. We are not selfless in this country. Anybody that goes into power, like he has said, have a function. See the big people that come there, interact with themselves. Things get wrong with the poor people. They hardly go there to empathize with them. They maybe just ask their aides to issue statement. They don't talk to us. Most governors, most presidents we have had, including our president now, they don't communicate with us. They don't empathize with us. Once in a while, they talk to us. I watched Mr. President, and I was illuminating on it. When he was in New York, he was interacting with the diaspora. Look at the way he was shaking their hands, interacting with them. The president have not done that in the country as far as I'm concerned. He has never visited a university and asked undergraduates, hey, how are you doing? Aluta, my children, how are you? He has not interacted with them, giving them the hope that things are going to be better. But look at how he was interacting with them outside. So unless you go out, you are not a Nigerian. But when you are out, a diaspora, he takes you serious. And that's why the children are going out. You can come in.
Prof,
yes.
I'm actually curious about this because, you know, I said something earlier on about philosophy, about ideology, about principles that drive the way we manage ourselves, the way we run our affairs. And I'm bothered, really. And it's also about where we got it wrong and where we are still getting it wrong, and why we may still get it wrong in the next 10, 15 years, 20 years if we are not careful. Because I was asking myself, because there's this, I know there's excitement about young people getting up and saying, enough is enough, we want some changes and everything. But my concern is also this, that how prepare those young people in terms of ideas, in terms of knowledge, in terms of principle. Because my worry is it an instinctive approach that we need? Because what I'm beginning to see, it's not a total condemnation of the emergent movement, of the young people. I'm excited because I work with young people. And that's what I've been doing for probably the past 20 years or thereabout. But my concern is that, Prof, people like you grew us in the 80s, and we grew up knowing that ideas drive change. But not just instinctive response to the stimuli in the environment. And that's the concern I have now. What is there now that is actually indicative of the fact that there is going to be a change? In 1999...
And what kind of change?
Yes, what type of change? In 1999, most of us that were involved in the struggle to end military rule in the country stood back. We didn't embrace the transition then. And at the end of the day, we found out what happened is what you said, total hijack of the state.
Capture, state capture.
It was total state capture. But now you also have a lot of young people who are trying to drive some change. Change towards what? Are we going to have another Arab Spring? Where you are going to have a large layer of young people actually taking the streets, toppling the system, or toppling a what I will call, not even the system itself, because unfortunately what Arab Spring did was I didn't topple the system. It toppled the government, but the system remained. How do we also embrace these young people and also say, look, yes, it's not just about instinctive response. What is going to change? What change are you driving? It's not just about changing older generation of kleptomaniacs with younger generation of spendimanias.
Thank you.
All right, so Tunde has dropped for us a couple of questions that we need to interrogate and unpack, especially what change do we want to see, and Emmanuel, he asked specifically what change. So because we were promised change before and we saw what the change is. But I want to take this to another dimension in terms of looking at where we are coming from again, and where I think from my perspective and the constituency that I represent is also concerned. Is the question around, I do recall growing up and remembering the Granite Pyramid. So I'm talking about the food security right now. Remembering the Granite Pyramid. Nigeria was known as a agricultural country. Granules, yam, cocoa, all kinds of food. We were so wealthy in terms of food security that people were not even worried. But now you can't go to the farm, because if you go to the farm, there is crisis waiting for you. Either you are kidnapped, or you are raped, or you are maimed, or your life even goes with it. So the food insecurity that is looming, is not is looming, is already with us right now. It's something that we need to begin to think. How do we get away from this? There were questions around, the war in Ukraine has affected the wheat and affected food security. But before the war in Ukraine, we have started getting to a crisis point. The point that women cannot go to farm. The point that farmers cannot go to farm and come back safe. The point that herders and farmers are fighting. The point that you can't get, doesn't it amaze you? A bread that used to sell for 400 naira is now sold at 1,000, 1,500. How many families can afford bread? If you have a large family like I do have, how are you going on earth to feed the families with a family of 5 with 3,000, and perhaps your salary is 18,000. So bread has become a classic commodity that poor persons cannot buy. So we have a problem on our hand, and I think this is the right time that Nigeria needs to address the two intertwined issues, which is the issue of insecurity and the issue of food crisis. Because I also feel it from families and friends who are asking you. I don't know how many of us have had people ask you, please give us 2 naira or give me a certain amount of money. It's because crisis is in the land, hunger is in the land, and a hungry population is an angry population, and is a population that can do anything to be able to survive. So you see a lot of media postages, people being attacked. Imone, we also heard, you also had an attack. One of our directors, just on the way for her to travel, her bag was grabbed. That is not the one. In my estate, they have attacked us like 2-3 times until everybody is beginning to buy their own security. And it takes me back to Tunde's point of view, right? So we are buying everything. Citizens are now buying, you are buying your security, you are buying your lights, you are buying everything. Even the road we pay, we contribute in our own estate to work on our road.
You are a government of your own.
Exactly. Is that the kind of country that we want to be in? My daughter is trapped in the definition of those who graduated. You finish your defense, you can't go for youth service, you can't do anything. So for the past COVID caught up with her, she said she was supposed to graduate in 21 years, and she's getting on to 23 or even past 23. So you have youth that are trapped in the circle that we have created. And it's not as if we don't know that there is a problem on our hands. Is Mr. President telling me that he doesn't know what is going on? Is Mr. President doesn't know that people are hungry? Is the data we are having, statistics we are having of the number of crimes that are increasing in the country, is that not enough early warning sign for us to know that we have a crisis on our hands? Is the price of food and commodities as simple as bread that I know growing up, that is a common commodity denominator for every family? Every family will have a bread on their breakfast table menu. Now you can't afford bread. I can't even afford bread. Because if you have family of 5, like I gave as an example, and you buy 1,500, that's 3,000 naira for 2 loaves of bread. How many persons is going to go? And in that, and the thing is then is that, have you bought sachet of milk? The sachet has reduced from the quantity of 2 scoops to 1 and 1.5. And sometimes they fill it up with sugar so that it becomes the quantity. So there is a crisis on our hands. That's my point. The point I'm trying to bring is that we have a crisis on our hands. And if people are hungry, that is where the problem is. You know, we can get away with things and say, oh, okay, we can manage no light. You put on your hand fan. You can buy a generator if you have it. You can do this.
What she's saying, in effect, is that hunger push people to embrace any form of change.
Exactly.
Now,
exactly.
Yeah, but let me just come in. Okay.
Maybe, Prof,
Yes.
because I'm still coming back to you. Because
Yes,
you're going to help us.
You talked about what type of change do we
want?
Yes. You see, we have seen the Arab Spring, which was not properly coordinated, but was mobilized, driven by the youth. There are 2, 3 examples about change that have happened. The British have just had their own change too, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Somebody who thought values don't matter in governance. You could go dancing when COVID says we should shut down and other people have shut down. A prime minister goes doing that. He has been punished. In Nigeria, we don't do that. We held them. And I think that is what the youth are gradually getting to understand, that we don't need to be hailing these people who are oppressing and holding us down again. Now, you also talked about what type of leadership. Do we have an ideology where they can follow? One of the ideologies that this type of thing can bring down is the issue of intimidation and manipulation you talked about. If they are able to galvanize themselves and come forward, it may not concretize even in the next election. But before the next 2nd, 3rd round of election, things are going to be different. Don't think that it's just starting today and it will end into something fantastic in the next 2, 3 months or years. It may not, it may. But what is the issue? We had a country, I've just forgotten the name. A young lady just became president from the far left. Yes, over 100 years, that never happened in that country. I've just forgotten the name, but maybe you can remind me to think. So it happens. She's just 37 years old. Yeah. She became a prime minister. We will get the name. I can't remember the head. I saw the story. Yeah. So, you see, these are issues that are going on. Now, what happens? With this type of mobilization, there is integration of the youth, what you have been talking about. What is our communality? This type of integration, mobilization brings certain form of integration to them, breaks down some of the identity crisis we've been having, because when they're on the street, they are not talking about I'm Yoruba, I'm from this state or that or that. They are saying we are youth and we are being marginalized and we'll come back. So they are getting a new identity.
A youth identity.
Yes, they are getting a youth identity, and that leads them to self-determination. We will determine that we will pull together, use our talents and resources, improve Nigeria, and no longer go out. Because they are also realizing that it is not even everybody that can go out. The Japa she talked about, not all of them can even make it.
Yes.
Some have tried and over and over and over, it's not possible. So what do? We will come back, use our talent, use our resources, and whoever is on our way as much as we can, we'll take you out. So those are the things I'm taking. Something needs to snap somewhere, and it's already snapped.
Very quickly,
already snapped.
Because our time is
all right. Since we are rounding up, quickly, I think probably let me quickly touch on the issue of the food crisis that she mentioned. And I think we need to properly frame this, because I'm also concerned about the way it has been framed over the years. And that's also because of the crisis of lack of proper orientation in terms of ideas that I've always spoken about. The issue of food crisis that we've had, particularly when we relate it to the issue of elders farmers crisis, it's also we should not also drive it away from the discussion around the issue of ownership of land in the country. Don't also forget the crisis we've had in different parts of the country, in Plateau State, in Benue State, in different places.
Kaduna.
It's also tied to the issue of control of land. And it's
And
not
economy.
an ethnic issue. Let's also understand it very well. Because the challenge we have is that the resources that are available are being hijacked by a few number of people, to the extent that the poor now have to literally strangle themselves to actually have space in which they are going to do their business. That's one. Then on the electoral system issue, and I'm beginning to query the issue of independence of the National Electoral Commission. And you find a situation whereby an electoral commission wakes up one day and just by the stroke of the pen decides to deregister a large number of political parties that are the only parties that the poor are actually able to say we own them. Of the parties that exist now, how many of them do the poor actually have space in that they can go on and campaign and seek elections on? These are also some. So it's not just about the changes in the electoral system, but what is that system going to deliver? If it's going to deliver just re-election of the same set of people that are put out in this crisis, nothing has changed.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen and lady. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. I think that these setup, this system that I adopted today really paid off, so that you can have more interaction amongst yourself rather than me just throwing the questions at you. And I think that it has yielded a lot in terms of ideas. Professor Gabriel Ketomoti is a dean of the postgraduate school at the University of Abuja. Thank you so much for coming at such short notice. And Nkechi Ilochi Kani is the head of programs at Action Aid Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time. And Tunde Aremu, a civil society activist, policy research and influencing manager at Plan International Nigeria. Thank you so much. That I called you up very late at night and you were able to make it here this morning. Thank you for your time.
Thanks
and
so
to you, our viewers out there, want to thank you for investing your time with us and for sharing in our ideas here on the program People, Politics and Power. Once again, happy independence to Nigeria, and we look forward to a better country, a more united country, a country where everyone has a say and where everyone has something to do or to eat. My name is Imoni Amarere. Bye for now.